Hello and welcome to Unpreachy, a podcast of homilies and reflections from St. John Chrysostom Parish. Today, Father Brian Zumbrum reflects on John chapter 6, verses 51 to 58, the Gospel reading for Sunday, August 18th, 2024.
So as someone who has spent his entire life in either suburbia or an urban center, I've always been divorced from the reality of where my food comes from. I simply walk down the aisles of Acme, selecting my produce, meat, and dairy, without giving a lot of thought to the process that got any of those items to those shelves. Heck, I'm the one that if that food is already processed and prepared and I don't have to do anything to it, I am absolutely spending the extra money to buy it that way. Less work, less effort, less mess. Which is probably why my dining experience in Benin, Africa left quite an impression. Because food to table is a whole different thing when the oblates are purchasing the vegetables we'll eat that night from their neighbor next door who grows them in their backyard. Or milk comes from the man down the street with the goats that he brings fresh every morning. But the one dinner that really drove this point home was our final night, when the oblates pulled out all the stops with a veritable feast, including numerous savory dishes of chicken. Chickens that they proudly declared had once been part of the little flock that had been wandering on the patio earlier that day. Well, suddenly this meal felt a little different, because those chickens had been our responsibility that week to feed them. And suddenly the flesh we were consuming became a lot more real and a tad more uncomfortable. I have to admit, I was rather unsettled by that whole meal. I guess I realized becoming conscious of what I choose to consume and why is not always a very easy process. There is some safety in distance and sanitation to where I don't have to think about what I'm eating or why I'm eating it. I don't have to think about what I eat as defining of who I am and the values that I hold. It's a lesson I was reminded of listening to the gospel for this week. For Jesus offering his very flesh to be consumed doesn't get more graphic than that. And yet, I wonder if, like our experience of grocery shopping, we have become too far removed from this sacrifice, too far removed from the actual cost that comes with consuming this flesh. You know, we gaze upon the crucifix all the time. It's in front of you and behind you. It is worn around plenty of our necks, hung in plenty of our homes. Heck, some of us have it tattooed on our very bodies. And yet, has it just become a sanitized image? One divorced from the actual death of a man who offered his life for the sake of a people? A man who lived and walked, was loved and cherished. A man whose mother held his broken body and wept over all that was lost. A man whose friends hid in upper rooms, grieving and afraid, totally unclear of how they would move forward after they watched him die. It is this flesh that we receive, the flesh of one who loved and was loved in return, flesh that was brutalized by the political and religious authorities of his day, flesh that was scarred and crucified before a jeering crowd, flesh that had been nourished by meals prepared by disciples, from fish pulled out of the sea and bread baked in hearths in kitchens. It is a flesh that knew both exhaustion and pleasure, flesh that knew intimacy and hardship, flesh that knew gentleness and violence. And it is this flesh that is supposed to define who we are. It is this flesh that is supposed to proclaim to the world who we are and what we value. For every time we come here and say that amen, when we receive that host and drink that cup, we are saying yes to that Christ. We are saying yes to a body broken, yes to blood poured out, yes to a sacrifice offered on our behalf, yes to his life and his death and his resurrection, yes to each person that Christ died for. When we say that amen, it is as if we stand before this congregation, facing each person in the room and saying, take me, take my life. I offer it freely to each of you in imitation of the one in whose life I have chosen to share. I hold nothing back. There is nothing I can hide. My idiosyncrasies, my vulnerabilities, my scars and fears and doubts, my faith and future, my family, friends, and failures, it is all laid bare before you to be received as the gift that it is, in imitation of the one who held nothing back, whose naked flesh was freely given to the world, a world that did not deserve it, but was chosen to receive it anyway. My friends, today we will once again come forward to freely receive what was once offered, to become what we choose to receive, and then to offer what we have become back to this world around us, in faith, in hope, and in love. I am the bread of life, he declares. This is what it means to receive it. What a great gift, what a great responsibility we say amen to this day. May God be praised.
Unpreachy is a production of St. John Chrysostom Parish in Wallingford, Pennsylvania. Visit us at sjcparish.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. This podcast was produced by Brendan Lorden with music by Skytoes on Upbeat. Thanks for listening. Be well.